Greetings, fellow members of the Esoteric Order of Gamers. Universal Head here, and we're about to embark on a series of new videos about Deadzone by Mantic Games. It's the War in Urban Battle Zones game. There's a heap of plastic in this box. All of these fortification terrain pieces, all of these miniatures. One thing, unfortunately, that doesn't come in this box are any instructions for building, painting them and putting it all together so you can play the game. But never fear, Universal Head is here. And we are going to, well, I'm not here, I'm here. But I'm going to come up with a series of videos which show you how to prepare the miniatures, how to paint them, how to build them, and get ready for gaming. So stay tuned to this YouTube channel. Don't forget to visit the Esoteric Order of Gamers at orderofgamers.com, and let's get started. There's a whole lot of stuff in your Deadzone box, and there's going to be quite a bit of work before you actually start playing. Here we have the modular plastic buildings which make up the terrain that goes onto your playing field. Here we have the miniatures themselves, and you can see they come in lots of tiny pieces. All of these have to be prepared, put together and painted. Here are the bases for the miniatures. So, how do we get started? We get organised. Now, the best way to work this out is to use the picture on the side of the box as a guide, and then just sort out the pieces with the right arms going to the right bodies until you've got them roughly laid out. Normally, the first thing you do with plastic miniatures is to give them a bath in water and detergent. This washes off any residue left over from the casting process, so paint and primer take to the miniatures nicely. However, in this case, there are so many detailed little bits that I'm going to make the miniatures first. I'll put them together, and once they're constructed, we'll give them a bath, wipe off that residue, then prime them, then paint them. Taking a pair of clippers, you can cut off any little bits of plastic or chunks of plastic that shouldn't be there. Also, this is where you want to check your joins. So here's an arm and a body. They fit together quite nicely, but if there was any extra plastic on there, I could clip that off and possibly file it down. But the important thing is that all my pieces fit together nicely. Okay, let's put the arms on this big guy. This is a pretty easy one, so put a little bit of glue in the socket. And these ones don't actually slot in, but you can match the bits up until they fit. That one goes... that's the wrong arm. No wonder it didn't fit. There we go. Hold it in place while it dries. Then the other arm. Have to be a bit patient. It's going to be very frustrating using glue because you're always eager to get on to the next bit. But sometimes you just have to be patient and hold it for a while until it's got a strong bond. And I've already put the head on there, so that's that figure complete. These stage 2 plague creatures are a little bit trickier because their arms are very similar. So make sure you do some dry fitting. Just take the figure's arms and test fit them into the sockets to make sure that you've matched up the right arms. Put them separately like this, and then you can take one and start to build it. When you're trying to match these up, have a look at the pictures on the box and look at things like the position of the arm, the way the fingers of the hand are positioned, and you'll also find that they have slightly different sockets. Some of them have round sockets, some of them have square sockets, so there's all kinds of clues to work out which arm belongs to which model. Then I'll put on the head. Now it's time to put him on the base. Bit of glue on the feet. The entire weight of this one is on its hand as it crosses the barricade. So I am going to put a pin in here just to make it a bit stronger. And by using a drill vise like this, I drill a little hole into the top. Then I've got a little bit of wire, that's 0.5 of a millimetre. Using a bit of super glue. I pop that in. And I'll just let that dry. And while I'm doing that, I'll drill another hole in the hand of the miniature. Being careful to go up through the arm so I don't poke out through the hand. Now you don't have to do this, and the plastic bond will probably be strong enough, but I'm just doing it for that extra bit of strength. Clip off the wire. Do a test fit. And now I've got a really strong blonde, which is reinforced by that pin. Okay, so after I filmed that, I realized I didn't like the position of the miniature, so I put a new hole to the side of my original hole. I've just filed over the top to hide the first hole I made, and I put the arm further over here to the left. What I'm going to do is show you another technique, and this is usually used for fixing bent miniatures or bent swords, bits like that. You've probably seen it before. It's just take a bit of freshly boiled water, dip the plastic into the water, leave it there for a few seconds, and then the plastic becomes a bit pliable. If you've got a bent sword or a bent pike or something, it will usually bend back into its original straight form. In this case we can use it so I can bend this arm a little bit into a position I'm a bit happier with. And I've got the pin there that I put in, so now if I put in the figure, I think I've got a much more dynamic pose. Really looks as though he's jumping over that barricade now. Now I've hacked into here a little bit, but I can fix that up with a bit of green stuff. I'll show you how to do that later. Now I did some research on the plastic that is being used here. It's stuff called Restic, which is a cheaper plastic resin mix of some sort. They all seem to have proprietary ingredients, but it is recommended that you use super glue rather than plastic glue. I've been using plastic glue on these other figures and the bond seems to be quite strong, so I don't really know why they recommend super glue, but anyway, I'll switch to super glue. Here it is. You just need a tiny bit. It's probably a bit too much there. There we go. Now, when you're putting your super glue lid back on, always clean the top and store your super glue standing up. And that way you'll put off the inevitable lid drying to the tube situation that always happens about halfway through. And there we have it. And you can see he's really jumping over that now. Looks a lot more exciting than the original pose, I think. Again, it's completely up to you. You can stick with the original pose or you can do a bit of conversion like this. As I go, I'll be cleaning off mould lines. Mould lines are a result of the casting process. The two halves of the mould come together and they squeeze out some of the plastic or restic or whatever's being used, and you get a little mould line. Now, they're particularly prevalent on these miniatures and it does take a little bit of work removing them. It's a pain in the neck, it's not fun, but you've got to do it to have good looking miniatures. You can see the mould line going down there. Now, there are all different ways of getting rid of this kind of excess plastic, but the best way is to get a sharp scalpel, nice sharp blade, and just carefully shave off the mould lines. I find if I shave it off and then give the blade a little bit of an up flick at the end, and that will just flick off the bit of excess plastic. and you just follow the mould line around the figure, carefully removing that plastic as you go. Now, with all these things, remember they're just gaming figures. You don't have to be too super perfect doing this. The idea is to get them on the table and play the game. So just remove it as quickly and as neatly as you can. And remember that you'll never be seeing the miniatures this close up. They'll be on the table and you'll be playing with them. So don't worry too much about being perfect and spending hours and hours on it. And here's where things get a little bit complicated. These are the rest of the enforcer figures except for the commander. And you can see they're made up of lots of tiny little bits. Legs, torsos, left arm, right arm, weapon. So, following the picture on the side of the box, I've been trying to organise these into their component bits. And I've almost got there. These look like all the right specialists. These are the general rank and file. This is the sniper. These are the little sentry guns. But I do have a few bits left over. It's like building an IKEA wardrobe, isn't it? Okay, we're making some good progress here. We've got 4 of the specialty figures done. Now you'll notice a band-aid has just appeared on my finger, and the reason is I just cut myself with this. Now I've been making these kind of things for literally decades, and it just goes to show you can never be too careful because you can get a little bit cocky with those very sharp blades. So I know everyone always says be careful when using scalpels, but really do stay aware of how sharp they are. Try and cut away from your fingers if possible. Don't put too much force behind the blade. If you're putting too much force behind it, your blade probably isn't sharp enough and you probably shouldn't be doing what you're doing. So lucky it was just a little cut, but it's just a little reminder how careful you should be when doing this kind of thing. Right, now it's on to these 5 generic troopers, and this is where I have to sort out which arms and weapons and torsos and heads and legs go with which. Well, it's taken a few hours, but all the figures are now put together. And there were a few pieces left over, but eventually I got everything together. They're very difficult to make, I have to say, and because they're so fiddly, it's very difficult to dry fit the pieces together to test that everything's going to look alright. So you really have to do it while the super glue is wet and hold it all together. It's a really tricky job. I also did notice a few problems with castings on some of the figures. The mould lines are quite prominent. The actual sculpting of the figures is just fine. They look great, but I just think the plastic material, the restic, and the casting is not as good as it could be. Anyway, I finally finished them all. I need a little more cleanup on these, and then they'll be ready to wash off any residue from the casting process with a bit of detergent and water, and then after that I'll texture the bases and then prime them. You can see I got the mould line off this cloak by rubbing it down with a little piece of fine sandpaper. It roughens up the texture a bit, but at least I got rid of that mould line. And here are the plague figures. So it's a tough phase, but it has to be done. And remember, don't spend too much time, just get it done quickly and cleanly, and the sooner it's done, the sooner you can get on to the fun bit, which is painting. It's blowing a gale outside in New Zealand today, but it's the perfect weather for staying inside and prepping and painting miniatures. This was quite a difficult phase, but it's over with. We've got all our miniatures built. The next thing we'll be doing is washing them and then basing them and then getting them ready for painting, which is a much more enjoyable phase. So stay tuned and look out for episode 2 of this Deadzone miniature construction video series. See you then.